Hello, so we're going to go through today the next how to. We're going to do how to deadlift today. So again, we'll cover first of all what it is. So deadlift is another compound full body movement working pretty much all the muscles in your posterior chain, from your hamstrings, glutes, lower back, upper back, basically all the musculature through your back, lats as well. Probably works more muscles than most any other movement you can do in the gym. So it's a really good, efficient movement to do. So in terms of how you're going to perform it, there's a couple of different options. The main two variations, you're going to have conventional deadlifts and your sumo deadlifts. Mostly just going to go through the conventional ones today, and then you can always revisit sumo at a later date. So I'm just going to use the bar for a quick demo and go through the setup as I do that. So when you're coming in for your conventional, you want to get your feet mid-foot over the bar. From here, you want to start getting nice and tight, bring yourself down to the bar, get a good squeeze, get a good grip, brace as hard as you can, keeping that neutral spine. From there, just keeping that wedge up, push hips through at the top nice and strong, and then come back down nice and controlled. Keeping the bar as close as you can all the way up. And then maintain that neutral spine position, so you don't want to be coming out of position, bending over, or getting into any of those kind of positions. You'll make sure you're looking after your lower back, keeping your brace nice and strong. So I mentioned about the brace in the squat video, so it's equally important, if not more so, in the deadlift, just because where your lower back is more involved, where you're over in that position, there's a lot of pressure on your lower back. Keeping that brace, so keeping your abdominals nice and tight, is going to help protect your lower back throughout the lift. So that's the main sort of technical cues for when you're doing the movement. If you're doing a sumo version, you're just going to be bringing your feet out wider, toes out slightly more, and your hands are going to be in between rather than outside of your legs. A few other things you'll see in terms of the technical cues is the grip. So you want to start off, if you're just starting out, with a double overhand grip. If you start with that and you find that your grip is slipping or you're suffering with your grip, you can move to a switch grip. So you have one hand over and one hand under. That's just going to help stop the bar from rolling in your hands. Another option is to just use chalk, is always a good option, and work on, make sure you have a good strong grip. So in terms of the technical cues, we'll leave it there, and then we'll move on to some common errors that you're going to find when you're doing deadlift. So mostly it's going to be some losing position in some part of the lift. So you might lose your neutral spine position. So where you want to be nice and straight, you might find yourself, if you're going maybe too heavy or if you're not thinking properly, slight curving of the lower back, anything like that, you want to try and avoid. Just make sure you're doing lots of practice with lighter weights, getting your form right, keeping that strong brace. Even as you get heavier and heavier, you want to always try and be able to maintain that neutral spine. Might be okay if you have a little bit of a curve, as long as you're keeping a strong brace and as long as it's not too excessive. More common errors, so linked in with that is going to be bracing. So not bracing hard enough, especially in deadlifts. The stronger your brace is, the stronger your lift is going to be, and the more weight you're going to be able to lift. So getting a really good strong brace, having a strong core is going to really help get your numbers up on deadlift. Something you'll see as well quite often is people going too heavy too often on your deadlift, because it's quite a strong position and you can move relatively quite a lot of weight in the movement. People tend to get a bit carried away and just try and pile on weight on the bar to see how heavy they can go. You want to avoid that, especially at the start, because you want to make sure your form is really good. And also as you get more advanced, you still want to avoid doing too heavy on the deadlifts too often, just because the recovery factor, they're going to be harder. It's one of the hardest movements to recover from, where you're using so many muscle groups and you're able to load it so much. So going too heavy too often is going to really stagnate your progress. In terms of the actual movement, again, common areas is losing the bar position. So you want to, the bar needs to be nice and tight, as close as it can be to your body. Sometimes you'll see the bar coming out too far and you're losing that position. Or when you're starting, you might be pushing the bar away on your shins. So start position is important to get right. All these little things just trying to make sure you're eliminating them so you're having a good efficient movement. Those are probably the most common errors you'll see. Again, there will be more errors, but we'll stick to just a small list of those for now. So if we move into programming, so how you're going to program deadlifts into your training. The main thing with that is you want to be careful, you want to program them sparingly, so keep the frequency low compared to other movements. So if you think about like a bench press, where you're not able to move as heavy a weight, it's less fatiguing. With deadlifts, you want to be more careful, because if you deadlifting, especially anything more than once a week, and especially if you're going heavy, you're going to really fatigue certain areas, especially with lower back, posterior chain, and that's going to sort of carry over into other movements, make you weaker in those movements. You'll quite quickly find yourself hitting a wall, and it's not going to be good for your long-term progress. So for the majority of people, probably a general recommendation would be once a week with deadlifts. If you're advanced, you might even be less, might be once every 2 weeks or once every week and a half, just to give yourself the recovery between those sessions. As a beginner, you're going to be able to do more often, just because you're not able to move the heavier weights, which have more fatiguing effect yet. Another thing that I generally recommend with programming deadlifts is keeping the rep ranges lower. So you don't want to be doing sets of 10, 15, 20 reps on deadlifts. It tends to be the more reps you do, you start to lose your form, and that's when you can get yourself in a bit of trouble with injuries, especially through your lower back. So don't tend to program anything above 5 reps on deadlift. That might seem a bit low, but it's tended to work in terms of progress. A really simple programming option with deadlifts that's worked really well is to cycle between 1 week sets of 5s, followed by sets of 3, followed by singles. Tends to work quite well because it gives you it's a fairly low volume approach, but gives you enough recovery and enough intensity to keep progressing. So yeah, just be careful with the frequency of deadlifts, because it can affect your training, make you fatigued quite quickly. In terms of other movements that will help get your deadlift up, again, similar to squats, doing variations of the same movement. So lighter variations that don't allow you to fatigue as much, use as much weight. So things like Romanian deadlifts, which is just a pure hip hinge movement, is going to work similar muscle groups, but you'll be able to recover from it quicker, and can be a bit of a better option for hypertrophy, simply because deadlifts are not a great option for hypertrophy, and more of a purely focused on strength movement. Rows, any kind of row variations where you're just building muscle through your back, it's going to make you stronger. And then your hinges, so hinge movements will always help. Anything lower back, so back extensions are good to throw in just to strengthen up your erectors, your lower back. As long as you're not doing too many so that they're interfering with each other, the deadlifts and the lower back work. And also you want to have your upper back nice and strong as well, just for stability, and your lats. So your lats play a good part in stabilising through the lift. So pull-ups, lat pull-downs, strengthening the lats is going to help create a stable, efficient deadlift. Those are probably the main kind of accessory movements that will be work. I'm just going to quickly mention a couple of other things. So I mentioned about chalk, can be a really change a lot how your grip is. So you don't want your grip to be failing before your muscles in your back. So chalking up your hands can just help you keep a nice stronger grip so that you can get more out of your training sessions. And obviously a belt as well. So a lifting belt, similar in a squat, when you're moving into those heavier sets, gives you that feedback to brace your core, makes a big difference in terms of the numbers you can lift, gives you that feedback just to get a nice strong brace again, so your lower back is nice and strong. So I think that's all we're going to cover for the deadlift. So that is the video on how to deadlift.